So MSNBC is currently, and as well as a lot of other liberal media outlets, are having a complete and utter breakdown right now. Between the people crying all over TikTok and between these media organizations trying to understand what the hell happened, how their games, how their tricks didn't work as well as what they thought, and also trying to figure out what they're going to cover over the next 4 years. They brought on MSNBC Al Sharpton to try to explain all of this. Now let's listen to this and pay very close attention, because the conversation is exactly why so many people hopped off of the liberal bandwagon for something different.
Let's bring into the conversation the president of the National Action Network, the host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Rev, good morning. I know you were with the Harris campaign last night. Obviously, as the night went on, things became more and more grim for them, ending with shock probably this morning as this race was called for Donald Trump.
No, probably shock would be the word for many that were at the Howard University party, and then disbelief. I think also what we've got to deal with, you're correct when you say the economy was weighed on a lot of the voters around the country, and a distorted view of the economy. Let's remember, Donald Trump is an expert promoter, and he was able to get a lot of myths across the table that really were not true. But it was not.
To me, it's hilarious that they talk about myths in the same sentence as economy. I took $5,000 and I put it into a brokerage account like 2 days before the election. I wake up today and I'm up, baby. I'm up. Stock market is doing things that we've not seen. All of the stocks before he just got elected was on sale, baby. All right, I'm doing better today than I was doing yesterday, okay? But there's myths being put through. Let's continue.
Well promoted on the other side. I think that we also have to deal with the issue of race and gender.
Here we go.
There was a lot of gender bias in this. There was a lot of race bias in this. And I think that we thought a lot of voters were more progressive in those areas than they were. When you have the Dobbs decision, and you see this kind of vote anyway with the person that put the 3 justices on the Supreme Court, you have to ask yourself, are we fooling ourselves saying that Americans are further down the road toward dealing with gender bias and race bias than we thought? So,
Fool this man!
Here we go with the victim narratives, these race identity. What I find so interesting about that is that as he describes race and gender bias, so because essentially what he's trying to say is that due to these biases, they're not going to elect a woman and they're not going to elect a minority, a black woman or an Indian woman, whatever the hell that she is or claims to be. They're not going to elect them because of those things. Meanwhile, they put right up on the screen that as of the last administration, you had 5% of the country thinks that it is an excellent U.S. economy, with 27% saying, we good, we all right. But then 35 and 32, so 67% is saying at it's not so good to poor. So could it be that there's people that are not even looking at the gender or the race of Kamala Harris, and instead they're looking at their current condition? So when you ask Kamala, what are you going to do differently than the Biden administration? And then she says, well, nothing. And if you are unhappy with the current economy, then you should vote elsewhere. But let's keep listening.
Fooling ourselves saying that Americans are further down the road toward dealing with gender bias and race bias than we thought. So I would say this, though. Donald Trump, I've known a long time, he will self-destruct. The problem that I see is not Trump. The problem is that those that can be appealed to in this way, and how we've got to bring this country together. And we cannot do it by being like January 6th ourselves. There would not be a January 6th on our side. We will deal with this in a dignified way and try to put the pieces together. So we've lost, but we lost a battle. The war is not over.
Well, Rev, let's talk about, you talked about gender and race. Let's talk about race. Donald Trump fared very well with Hispanic voters, especially Hispanic men. The numbers are coming in still a little early, but I think he did better with black men than was expected in the past. What do you think pushed that, especially with the Hispanic voters going for Donald Trump as much as they did? Because that made a big difference.
I think that a lot of it was he was able to sell a lot of Hispanic voters that immigration was a threat to them, that some of the people coming across the border was a threat to them. I think that we've got to be honest, among Hispanic men and black men, there's a lot of misogyny.
There we go.
And I think that we've got to deal with the reality that he appealed to this whole false macho thing that some black men and some Latino men went for. I think that we cannot sit around just bedwetting. We've got to deal with the reality, and we've got to deal with the situation as it is in our own communities.
This is just so sad. I mean, this demonstrates why men are voting conservative in record numbers. It demonstrates why so much femininity within men have been pushed forward, because on this side of the party, and I don't know when this happened, because I used to be on this side as I grew up, and I thought that this was the way that you were supposed to vote. It's almost instinctual. It's like if you black, you vote Democrat. But when you begin to break down some of these arguments, or you begin to see how they'll call a patriarchy, how they'll call chauvinistic or misogynistic when referring to men, when it's really just masculinity, it's just so insane. And I think him utilizing this kind of weaponized language, of course, is going to rally, liberals around this idea, as well as men that is more feminine. But the reality is that many minority men, both Latino and African American, when you break it down, are more conservative acting in nature. And it's just so crazy, because why are you saying that? Because we watched him almost take a bullet damn near twice, stand up at the end of it and begin to chant. That to me is strength. It's not misogyny. And I continue to think that when you have control of so much, including that red button, you need somebody with strength. But yeah, after having debate with liberal college age woman or feminine young man, after debate, we're going through undergraduate school or graduate school, I began at a certain point to understand where the basis of their arguments came from. And it's based on this new ideal of masculinity, one of which the majority of most younger men today are not vibing with. They don't want to vibe with, because in return, those young men get ignored. They get told that women would much rather prefer the bear than to be around them. So why would a man want to be a part of something that doesn't benefit them or doesn't speak up for them?
Bedwetting gets you, political bedwetting gets you exactly this. You don't want to do that. At some point, Democrats are going to have to confront some realities that they haven't wanted to confront in the past. They didn't want to confront the past issues on the border. It took them too long to confront that. We talked about a transgender inmate ad that ran 30,000 times that the Democrats refused to respond to, despite the fact it was Donald Trump's own policy, because I guess some people in the campaign, and we talked about this before, thought it might be, maybe they were too woke to actually respond to a false ad, and maybe they were afraid that they would be attacked by their own base. There are so many questions for the Democrats to answer, but one of them, the one that I just saw that's going to be staring them in the face for some time if they don't do something about it, is that 45% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump.
45.
That is George W. Bush. I remember when George W. Bush got 44% of the vote in 2004. It sent shockwaves. Yeah. This also, if you look at this, if you look at younger voters, you look at all these different. We've all been talking about a new Republican Party. There needs to be a new Republican Party. This morning, this is about as bleak as any time for Democrats since the so-called 1984 San Francisco Democrats. It's time for the Democrats to take a good, long, hard look at how this happened. And if they just say Trump bad, Democrats virtuous, they're going to keep losing. Because this, again,
he's right.
Is so widespread. This is not about just Donald Trump. This is about the Democratic Party and being radically disconnected from the rest of the country. Look at the map.
Yeah, as we talk about how Donald Trump won, we had a number up there. It's important to point out, Donald Trump did the same with black men as he did in 2020. So really look toward Latino men, where that number has gone way up for Donald in his favor. And we were just talking about New Jersey, a state that Kamala Harris won by only 5 points, and Steve Kornacki was just breaking down how exactly it was that close. You go inside places like Hudson County, these are cities, heavy Latino populations, and they went for Donald Trump. And that's something that this party, the Democratic Party, really needs to take a long.
You know, what's really interesting about the black vote, the fact that it stayed the same, when I would say this election cycle, you've seen the most amount of black creators speak up against liberals in the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris. You've seen the most. Just take a look at YouTube alone. You have content creators that are blowing up right now and have been blowing up because they have a pro-Trump stance. But in the polls, the vote remained relatively the same, which tells to me that there's a lot of brothers out there and sisters that are voting conservative, but publicly amongst their friends, they keep quiet. They don't talk about it. And more than likely for fear of being ostracized. So that's actually the end of the video. Let's just go down in the comment section and see if we can learn anything. MSNBC is in depression today with over 8,000 likes. Pollsters, what's the point of having them when they're always wrong? Today has a real 2016 vibe. Listen, at the end of the day, the American people have spoken. And while I think that there was a plan to push a narrative of her being a black woman to get the black vote, they didn't anticipate was the Latino vote. And to see his numbers that much higher in 4 years really says something. Guys, drop me some of your comments down below. What do you guys think? Or was you voting for? And listen, to anyone who wants to unsubscribe based off of this type of content, we can have a difference of political opinion, but that's the point. To be able to converse and to talk about different ideas that matters to us the most. Until next time, YouTube. Peace.